voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I will open my eyes. I will open my eyes. I will not look away. I will not look away. I will use this gift I've been given every day. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. I will give up myself. I will give up myself. I will reach out my hand. I will reach out my hand. I will use this heart I've been given to take a stand. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu b'tselem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu b'tselem Elohim. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for Community Unity. Thank you to the cantorial trio, the Shul Sisters, for sharing their beautiful song with us. We all have a powerful voice that can change the world. It's so wonderful to see all of you this evening. I'm Leslie Yoffe, one of the co-chairs for tonight's event, along with Dana Sandweiss. We are all very fortunate to live in the St. Louis Jewish community. There are so many amazing organizations doing exceptional work and a myriad of ways to get involved. Tonight, we have 28 different Jewish women's organizations represented, with Jewish Federation of St. Louis acknowledging the importance of bringing community together. Women's Philanthropy thought this was a great opportunity to showcase and learn about each other and celebrate our commonality. We have a lot of thanks to share tonight. Let's give a hand to all of you in our audience who in your own way, large and small, have lent your time, volunteering, attending, donating, and supporting all of the great work being done by our participating organizations represented here tonight. We have over 500 volunteers joining us tonight. Now that's truly amazing. Thank you to our wonderful event committee for their creativity and hard work in planning tonight's event. Your input and support are so greatly appreciated. Please take a second to press an emoji so we can publicly thank you. Thank you to Hannah Maurer for sharing her beautiful drawing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg with us, and to Zipporah Yari for preparing the delicious challahs for each of us to enjoy. I'd also like to recognize a few special guests with us tonight who play an important role in women's philanthropy and federation. Julie Yawitz, Women's Philanthropy Vice Chair of Engagement, Amy Bender-Levy, Chair of Women's Philanthropy, Mackenzie Isringhausen, Resource Assistant of Women's Philanthropy, Jessica Wax, Associate of Women's Philanthropy, Stacy Wagerman, Manager of Women's Philanthropy, Julie Gibbs, Vice President of Development, and Brian Hersted, President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis.
In the midst of these, can you hear me? Sorry. In the midst of these challenging world we're currently living in, it's wonderful to have an opportunity for all of us to celebrate together tonight. Thank you to everyone who participated in our community service project collecting food for the Harvey Kornblatt Jewish Food Pantry. It's amazing what women can accomplish when we come together. On the eve, oh, that's so great, RBG. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah this past September, we were all shocked and saddened by the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg embodied Jewish values, including a commitment to tikkun olam, and our tradition's commandment, tzedek, tzedek, tador, justice, justice will you pursue, which hung in her chambers in the United States Supreme Court. Following tonight's event, you will all receive a link to download your own poster with Ruth Bader Ginsburg image and these powerful words, thanks to the Voices and Vision series from the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy teaches and inspires us all to be trailblazers and to be change makers for a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. When we must stand up for what we believe is right, make sure that our voices are heard and carry others with us on this journey. There are many wise and inspirational quotes from Justice Ginsburg, but the one that steered us during our planning of the event tonight was to make life a little better for people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is. One lives not just for oneself, but for one's community. May we all be like Ruth.
If you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside yourself, something to repair tears in your community.
No doors should be closed to people willing to spend the hours of effort needed to make dreams come true.
We are a nation made strong by people like you.
In my lifetime, I expect to see 3, 4, perhaps even more women on the High Court bench, women not shaped from the same mold, but of different complexions. We are at last beginning to relegate to history books the days of the token, one at a time woman.
The number of women who have come forward as a result of the Me Too movement has been astonishing. My hope is not just that it is here to stay, but that it is as effective for the woman who works as a maid in a hotel as it is for Hollywood stars.
I have had the great good fortune to share life with a partner who believed at age 18 when we met that a woman's work, whether at home or on the job, is as important as a man's.
It helps sometimes to be a little deaf. I have followed that advice assiduously, and not only at home through 56 years of a marital partnership, I have employed it as well in every workplace, including the Supreme Court of the United States. When a thoughtless or unkind word is spoken, best tune out. Reacting in anger or annoyance will not advance one's ability to persuade. To make life a little better for people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is. One lives not just for oneself, but for one's community.
We are honored to be joined tonight by Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, Rabbi and friend of Justice Ginsburg. Rabbi Holtzblatt is celebrated by Forward as one of the most inspiring rabbis in the country and was named one of Jewish Women International's Women to Watch. As senior rabbi at Adass Israel Congregation in Washington, D.C., she has created groundbreaking programs and services, including their caretaking and bereavement efforts, the Makem DC Adult Learning Curriculum, and the Jewish Mindfulness Center of Washington, drawing thousands of people to the conservative synagogue. It was at Adass Israel where she formed a connection and friendship with Justice Ginsburg. Please help me welcome tonight Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt.
Yeah, so wonderful to be here.
So wonderful for you to be able to join us tonight. I'm going to start, we have some questions for you tonight. I'm going to start with the first one. Rabbi Holtzblatt, what has it been like to lead as a rabbi at this time, in particular in Washington, D.C.?
So first, I want to welcome all of you. It's wonderful, as I said, to be here. Thank you for inviting me. These have been crazy times that we have been living through, both the pandemic and certainly also the national story that has happened with the Capitol insurrection that began in January, or I should say happened in January. I want to say a few things. I want to say one is that I think we have learned how deeply interconnected we all are, that our actions affect each other. And when we raise each other up and we're present for each other and we take each other's health and wellness seriously, we have the ability to heal. And I also think, what we've seen here in DC is that words matter and our actions matter. And that as leaders, as individuals, I know there are many women leaders on this Zoom tonight, that when we spread love and light and humanity, that is what follows us in our legacy. Watching that video of Justice Ginsburg, it becomes so inspiring because what she did day in and day out was to lift up humanity and to make rights more available to many, many people. And I would say it's been a hard time here in our nation's capital. That is definitely true. And like all of you, there's a lot of exhaustion and a lot of feeling of wanting this stage in our lives to end and have us move into something new. And at the same time, I also think there's an enormous amount of gratitude for being able to have community like this, where we have moments where we come together and we share what we care about and we remember what we care about and remember the world that we're building together. So what we build resilience for the days to come.
I think, Leslie, I think you're muted.
There we go. Rabbi, how has Judaism shifted or changed during this time?
So, one of the things that while it's been very difficult to be separate, I think, thank God for Zoom. I mean, Zoom was created for this moment. And look at all of us have figured out how to use it, right? How to get on, how to mute and unmute. One of the things that I think has been incredible for Judaism, while it's been horrible to not be together and to not hear each other singing in a collective voice, one of the things, at least in synagogue life, that I think has been so remarkable is that, all of the boundaries that have been put up, the walls for entry into a synagogue, so many people have them, right? I don't speak enough Hebrew. I don't have enough knowledge to go. What if I don't go every week? Can I go once a month? All of these things, right? Will people know what I'm thinking when I'm sitting, when I'm standing? What if I don't know how the choreography goes? The thing about Zoom and broadcasting, live streaming, many synagogues around the country, obviously not every movement, but many movements have decided that live streaming services and not only in synagogues, but things like this, right? Events where we get together we're coming into people's homes, and Judaism is coming into people's homes. It's in people's kitchens, it's in people's cars, it's in, it's in the playroom. My kids will hear morning minyan. I used to leave the house early in the morning to go and lead morning minyan at the synagogue. It's right here, right? They're seeing me in my dining room leading. And so Judaism is in people's homes in a way that I think before there were so many barriers up. And I think this time has allowed Judaism to really enter everywhere. And that's something I think is really something to be excited about, and to figure out, what do we want to do with that? How do we want to continue what this pandemic has taught us about these new pathways that are open? I guess the other thing that I will say is, being someone who, I always feel like we have to take down the boundaries, like the moat that exists between clergy and congregant. That is something that I'm continually working on, is like, how do we make people human, right? We're all in this human existence together. And I think people are coming to lots of events. In fact, tonight, people may have showed up in their sweatpants or their pajamas or from their bedrooms, right? And all of these ways that people are coming to events or coming to services or coming to classes fully in who they are. And that's something I also hope to transfer. I don't necessarily think we should all be showing up in our pajamas when we return to our lives, but really figuring out, how do we live our full selves in the spaces that we inhabit, and how do we bring that in the world that, God willing, we're building towards.
Thank you. This next question is you could probably go on about this, but can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Yeah.
In under 5 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
You can definitely cut me off if I'm going to.
No.
Feel free.
No.
So I met Justice Ginsburg in 2014. My husband, Ari, was one of her clerks on the court. And when he was interviewed by Justice Ginsburg, she was very excited that he was married to a rabbi. She said that was a first for her, that she never had a clerk who had a rabbi as a wife. And so I first met the justice actually in October of 2014. The court held an event for all of the clerk's children, and I have two. And it was Halloween, and the event was to have your kids dress up and go trick-or-treating in all of the justices' chambers. It's a very Washington thing to do. So our kids, we decided we would get our Purim costumes out and dress them up and go. And we ended the last, the second to last chambers was Justice Scalia. And as you know, Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg were very good friends, although very oppositional on the court. They were very good friends outside of the chambers. And we ended in Justice Ginsburg's chambers. And we had a long talk with our children that night, that when we went into her chambers, they needed to behave. One was, I think of how old my kids were at the time. I think one was 7, one was 3. Mm-hmm. And we entered, and my 3-year-old stood on her couch and began to have a tantrum. And I thought to myself, I'm not leaving. Like, my husband gets to be here every single day. I'm staying. So he looked at me like, take this kid out of here. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. So he took our son lovingly, but hopefully outside of her chambers. And my daughter and I stayed in the room, and she talked to us about my daughter went and touched, I said, don't touch anything. She touched every object that was on the desk, the bobbleheads, the picture of Obama, there were tons. She loved her trinkets in her office. And she was so kind to my daughter, Noah. And we had a long conversation about what it meant to be a justice, about what it meant to be in the position she was. She loved speaking to not only women, but young girls, and having young girls see her in her chambers and see all of the things that young girls could imagine they could be in their lifetimes. So that was really the first time that I met her. And then the relationship developed over many years. of studying together, of having her come to Addis and be there for the holidays. We wrote a piece together later that year in 2014 for the American Jewish World Service on the women in the Passover story. That was a really fun thing to do with her, and to kind of explore that together.
That's wonderful. How old are your children now?
So my daughter's 12 and she will be 13 next week. And my son is 9 going on 10.
Oh,
So, Rabbi, did Ruth ever come to you for religious views on any issues?
So the thing is, Justice Ginsburg's, she did not live an observant Jewish life. Her spirituality was really in the opera. When she entered the Kennedy Center, and I was privileged to be able to go there with her, it was like everything turned off, and she just, she could leave every brief behind and just be in that space. And that space really was that was her mode of spirituality. And she knew every aria. Puccini was a favorite of hers. And so when we spoke, it was much less about, I really did not give her views. She didn't ask my views on, psak halacha, of giving her decisions on, halachic views on Jewish law. It really was when we spoke, there were things that she was writing that she would ask for help with, if it involved a Jewish subject. There were many moments where she was awarded different prizes. For instance, the Genesis Prize, where she would call and say, these are the things I want to donate the money to in the Jewish world. Can you help me do research on organizations that are going to fit that mold? And she cared so much that the organizations that she supported actually did the work that they say that they do. She was very thorough in making sure that the places that she both gave money and spent time were places that were working for people who were marginalized, working to make sure that rights were expanded as much as possible, and that justice, tzedek terdov, justice, was constantly in the forefront of what she did, no matter where she was.
Did Ruth Bader Ginsburg ever share or discuss why she chose to hang tzedek terdov, justice, justice you shall pursue, in her chambers with you?
She, there were 2 things that she pointed out to me when I visited her chambers. One was that sign, tzedek terdov, and she talked about it as being really a calling for her. That she felt that even from being a young girl, that having not had the rights that her male counterparts had in the world, that instead of, these are now my words, but instead of feeling resentment or anger, that was not Justice Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg took every single thing in her life that became a barrier, and she figured out how to conquer it with energy. That is what she did. And tzedek terdov was really, a rodef is someone who chases, right? It's someone who is constantly chasing something else. And that's how she talked about that phrase, was that to chase justice for those that are less fortunate, for those who don't have power, for those who don't sit at the seat of the Supreme Court and have the ability to actually have a deep impact in the way that law and rights are distributed in this country. She saw that as a charge that was given to her, and from the depths of our Torah. The other thing that she pointed out a number of times when I visited her was the mezuzah that hung in her chambers. She received a mezuzah from a women's yeshiva that had visited from New York. They had come to visit her chambers, and they had sent her this mezuzah as a gift, and she hung it on the right side of her chambers, exactly where the mezuzah should sit. And actually, after the funeral, her family gifted me that mezuzah, and so we have it here in our home, and it will travel in some of the exhibits that are going to be happening after this pandemic, that are going to celebrate her life. And so that was a real gift. I never knew if it really had a kosher cloth in it, and I'm happy to tell you that it did.
Oh,
It does.
it's a wonderful.
That's lovely. So, Rabbi, you told us about the personal story of when your first meeting with RBG. Any other personal tidbits that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I guess so. There are two from the same evening that I'd like to share, which I think you'll enjoy this story. One is about her character, and the other one was just a fun story that I think you'll enjoy. It was a few years ago, I think it was 2017, when every justice has an official portrait that is painted of them, and they choose the artists, and they choose, they work with the artist to figure out what the background is going to be, much like presidential portraits. And once they have died, they hang in the Great Hall at the Supreme Court. And it was the unveiling of her portrait, which until her death was, I believe, in the Smithsonian. I think I'm right about that. But it was the unveiling of her portrait, and she invited all of her former clerks and their spouses, so I was there, and it was all the justices of the court, and many of her clerks have become great legalists in their own right. And we were all there in the beautiful halls of the Great Hall, white marble and the columns. I mean, it's just a grand space. And when she got up to thank everybody, the artist spoke, and she got up to thank everybody for coming. And she said that she wanted to speak of three people. She, of course, thanked her family, her kids, her grandkids, her beloved Marty, who had died. But she spoke about her housekeeper, Elizabeth, and she thanked Elizabeth. And she also thanked her two secretaries, who she said without them, she couldn't do anything that she does. And there was a moment for me of, in a grand hall like that, right? In a moment where you have probably the greatest legal minds that are sitting before you, right? In a very high and mighty place, to thank the people who often go unseen, unnoticed, unnamed. That really was who Justice Ginsburg was. It was who she was in her life. It was who she was in her work. It was who she was in what she did for the American legal system. And I want to tell you that her staff loved her. They loved her. I'll tell you something. You're gonna have to make me be quiet in a minute. The Monday, and I'll say this a little bit later, but the Monday that I went down to the court to walk the space before the funeral, after I walked the space and talked to the staff that was at the court, I went up to her chambers to see her staff. And when I tell you that they were as distraught as if this was a direct family member, that is what she meant to everybody who worked and was in her presence, because that's the kind of human she was. I can leave it at that.
How did you find out that you would be officiating at her funeral, and how did you decide how you would structure what you would say at the court and at the Capitol?
So I found out of Justice Ginsburg's death with everyone else. I knew she was very ill, and we had been in touch, but I did not know that she was on the brink of death. And I'll tell you, it really was almost like a state secret, because she really was trying her hardest to hold on until November. That was very, very important to her. And so I was leading Rosh Hashanah services on Erev Rosh Hashanah. I was in our main sanctuary at Addis, and we were on our live stream, and our assistant rabbi was delivering her sermon, because the assistant rabbi delivers on Erev Rosh Hashanah. And someone from our staff came and told me from 6 feet apart that Justice Ginsburg had died. And I will say to you, as with all of you, my heart sunk. It was unbelievably upsetting. And I also felt like maybe she's finally going to have some rest. And I went home that night and I thought to myself, to be honest, I thought it must not be me, because had I been the one that was going to officiate at her funeral, I would have known. I do not use my phone on Shabbat or Chagim, but I said to my husband that night after we came home and we reminisced and we cried and we talked to our kids, I said, I think tomorrow I should bring my phone just in case. I should leave it on and just bring it in a bag and put it on, put it on the stender that is right next to where I'm going to be leading from. And sure enough, at 2 minutes to 9, right before we were going live on our live stream for Rosh Hashanah Day 1, my phone rang and I saw the number and it was the court, and I knew the court number. And it was then that I found out that she had put in her wishes that I was to officiate at the funeral.
Well, it was a beautiful service, and I know how difficult it must have been, but we all certainly appreciated your words. So obviously, Ruth gave a lot of statements during her lifetime, and many of them became famous quotes. Why do you think that was?
This thing, there's so much about her, the fact that she became the notorious RBG, which for those of you who know the notorious BIJ, I happen to be someone who loves rap music. You never know that by, what I look like and feel like and all that. But I love rap music. It's how my kids have learned all their curse words. But it's very cathartic. But she was this tiny little thing, right? I mean, when she spoke, she paused between her words. She was incredibly erudite. She was very soft-spoken, that it was sometimes hard to hear her when you went and actually listened to cases at the court itself. And yet her power was in what she said and how she constructed the law and her strategy. She learned that strategy originally from Justice Marshall. And I think it was that she was unbelievably disciplined. She was disciplined, as you played in the opening, where she said sometimes it helps to be a little bit deaf. That was a discipline. It was a discipline to decide that she cared more about the outcome of the words that she used more than she cared about the interactions in the moment. And she was very strategic about her relationships, about what she said and when she said it and how she used her voice. And I think the power that she brought was that she said what so many of us have felt over the years. I mean, I can't see all of you out there, but I assume we have a wide range of ages, and likely people who are a similar age that RBG was, and went through many things that she did, being one of the only women in her graduating class at Harvard. First at Harvard and then at Columbia Law School, at Cornell, being told that she was taking the seat of a man, and basically what was she doing there? Those were experiences I think so many women went through, but never could give voice to. And I think when she gave voice to them from the position of power, she spoke for so many of us that actually went through these experiences. And so many of us who, myself, having had so many more opportunities because what women before me created, there's still been so many barriers that we, even in my generation, have had to cross over. And to have a woman in power speak in that manner and to use her voice for power, I think has given us all more courage, has given us all more strength to be who we really are meant to be in the world.
Thank you.
I'm going to put you on the spot real quickly. Do you have a favorite quote?
I have a few. I mean, I think when she said, she was asked, when will there be enough female justices on the court? And she said, when there are 9. And the reason I love that is not because, of course, we need men's voices too. We can't, I absolutely believe that. But I think, the idea that that would not be, when that, when having 9 women justices is not seen as something that's extraordinary, but that is just, this is part of what it means to have women leaders and have that not be something that is unique, but is part of the identity of who we are as a country. And I think that not only of women, but also she thought that of immigrants and people who live in the margins and who are vulnerable. And when we expand rights so that people can be in their full selves in this country, we will have become the country that we want to be.
From their full selves. I love that. And this is kind of also kind of in the same vein, but what do you see as her lasting legacy and message?
I think there's so many things.
Yeah.
So hard to narrow it down. I'll give you a few, and I'll be
Under 5
I'll
minutes.
be brief. Okay. I think Justice Ginsburg's drive was really for justice. It was to expand the law, right? And she was able to do that with the 14th Amendment. And she was able to step into that role herself. But not only, I think so many people will step into that role themselves and then will not think about all the generations to come after them. And that is one of the things that she did that I myself will be forever grateful, was that she was a power sharer. She wasn't a power keeper. And that's, I think, one of her incredible legacies and that's something I hope many of us, women and men, will learn from her, was that when she had the spotlight, she shared it. When she had a seat on the court, she figured out how to expand rights for all of the others that came before the court. When she had a voice, she used it so that generations after her would be able to find their own voice and not fight as hard as she had to. And that kind of power sharing is something that I think we don't have tons of examples of. And I think that really is something. Small anecdote, when I wrote the piece with her for American Jewish World Service, which is a Passover insert, as I said, on the women in the Passover story. Honestly, when she came to ask me to help her write that, I saw myself as her Jewish clerk. That's really how I saw myself at first. I thought, here I can research midrashim for her. She was interested in Shifra and Pua, and I could open the world of midrash to her. That was something I could do for her. And we wrote the piece, and her clerks edited it. And the night before it was meant to be published, she came to me and said, I'd like to put you in the byline. Is that okay with you? I said, yeah, that's okay. But that's what I mean. It's that every opportunity she had to share that position, she did it. And I just think that's an unbelievably unique role. I mean, even beyond obviously expanding the 14th Amendment and equal rights and everything she did for women and men and the gay and lesbian community in our country, immigrants, I mean, the Voting Rights Act, all of it. But I think power sharing was a big one.
You've really given us such great insight to who she was, which is so appreciated. So this event is about bringing Jewish women together from all backgrounds and experiences. Would you like to share any thoughts on how we can tie in community to a call to action from a rabbinical perspective?
Well, that's such a good question. I think, look, I think we have to constantly remember that we are all connected to each other. I think one of the things that has happened over several years is, with the rise of social media, and I happen to use social media. It's something I definitely use those platforms, and those platforms have definitely helped, us spread our message of Judaism out in the world. But I also think in a world where we are separate, right? We have lived the last 11 months really apart. We sometimes forget how much we need each other as humans, how important it is to not see always the issues first, but to see humans first, right? That we all have a human story, that we are all intimately connected with each other. We have the same blood, we have similar grief, we have similar joys, And oftentimes we allow those wedge issues to come between us, even in the Jewish community. I mean, we all know this. There are certain issues that in certain communities we can't even talk about. And I think at its core, what we are meant to do is to see each other's humanity and to make space for each other. And by the way, to also make space for ideas, right? That idea of machloket l'shem shamayim, that to disagree with each other is not a bad thing, but it's how we do it. And we always want to remember to put our humanity before anything else.
Thank you. So if we're going to go to some questions that were submitted before tonight. And I also want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for Rabbi Holtzblatt, please put them in the chat. Feel free. And I'm going to start with our first question from Carol Cohen. And Carol asks, how do we as Jewish women combat the era of hate and division that exists today while honoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy?
Such a good question, Carol. I'm on this road with you. We haven't figured it out either, but I'll give you a few thoughts. I think one is what I said in the answer to the previous question. Recently, I was on a call on a Zoom presentation with Rabbi Daniel Hartman from the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And we were talking about this division. It was actually right after the insurrection here at the Capitol in DC. And we were talking about this severe division that we have in our country right now. And you know, he brought up the story of Hillel and Shammai. And as you all know, you know, Hillel and Shammai often sat at opposite sides of an argument, right? And Hillel's often won. In fact, the majority of the time, Hillel's decisions won out in the history of our people and our tradition. But they still, they sat at the same table. You know, they have allowed their children to marry each other. They continued to educate their students to actually care about each other. And there's a great story in the Talmud that says that the reason that Hillel's opinions won was not because they were better argued, was not because, you know, they were more popular, but it was because Hillel always taught Shammai's opinions before Hillel taught Hillel's opinions. And so the idea of actually knowing the person that you are keneged, that you are standing, you know, in front of, and being able to articulate what it is, what shoes they sit in. It doesn't mean you're going to agree. It doesn't mean we're going to end up in the same side of, you know, the same, you know, we're going to end up in the same place. But it means that we can build a world where there can be difference, and the difference doesn't have to be violent. And I think that that really is a legacy of also Justice Ginsburg. I mean, as you know, she disagreed enormously with, you know, she's known for her dissents over the last several years when she was in the minority in the court. And she still carried on outside of that court in her relationships with Justice Scalia. Justice Roberts was the other eulogizer at the court. She chose Justice Roberts to eulogize her. She believed so much in the institution, and the institution was important to her, and the relationships were important to her. That didn't mean she didn't have vehement disagreement and dissent, and was very honest about what that dissent was, and obviously used that voice in the world. But she also saw human beings for in their real humanity, and she loved humans. She loved humanity, even when they sat at very different sides of an argument than her.
Thank you. We have a question from Judith Newmark. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said her mother was a huge influence on her and might have had a great career herself had she been born in a different era. Can you tell us a little about her mother and their relationship and how she influenced her career?
I mean, I think her mother would have loved to have seen her career. What mother wouldn't love to see their child grow up to be the hero, you know, that will be remembered for all time? I mean, what an incredible thing. Her mother, Justice Ginsburg was very close with her mother. Her mother died actually 2 days before she graduated from high school. And Justice Ginsburg was supposed to be the valedictorian of her class. She was voted valedictorian, and she never delivered that speech. In fact, she didn't even go to graduation because her mother's funeral was on the day after graduation. And so it really was a very tragic, I mean, she experienced tragedy beyond tragedy in her life, and she kept rising again and again and again. She always talked about her mother as being someone who taught her to be a lady, which is, I say it kind of tongue in cheek. She never said it tongue in cheek, but for someone who grew up in the 20th century and really thinking about women's rights, it's kind of a funny thing to think about. But I actually think that that's where her idea of not listening to what everybody says when it's a negative thing. I think she always felt like you need to show up professional, right? You need to show up and not, she never dug into anger. Anger was something that she really felt should not have a place in the professional. And if one can control it in the private world, I'm less good at that. But she really, she was, and that was, I think, a real influence of her mother, of how you show up. The other thing was her mother so deeply believed in Justice Ginsburg's curiosity. She pushed her to explore. She pushed her to learn when she had questions, to dig deeper. And I think her intellectual pursuits were very much inspired by her mother, and her mother's belief that Justice Ginsburg, or Ruth at the time, had a deeply intelligent mind and could soar even beyond the boundaries of the time that they lived in.
Reminds me of my mother, who might be on this call. So we have, our next question is from Marcy Kornfeld. Ruth Bader Ginsburg did not have a bat mitzvah. Did her daughter or granddaughter?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure. So her daughter's name is Jane and her granddaughter's name is Clara. She actually has many granddaughters. I shouldn't say the only one. She has, I believe she has 3 granddaughters. And I hope I'm right about that. I think I'm right. Clara's the one that I know best. I think Clara had a bat mitzvah. I don't know if Jane did. Clara was the person who came with Justice Ginsburg over the last several years to Addis for high holiday services. She used to say to her Bubby, let's go to shul. And they would come together and they would sit together, and it was so amazing. And actually Clara, one of her granddaughters, is actually working in the reproductive rights division at the ACLU, which is where Justice Ginsburg started that career, her career of litigation. And so there's a sort of a very sweet story about the legacy. But I know Judaism is important to them and their identities as a family.
Rabbi, thank you so much for sharing all these beautiful stories and insights with us. Greatly appreciate it.
Of course. Such a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you for being here with us tonight and for your time. Next we have Amy Bender-Levy.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Holtzblatt, for your inspiring words this evening and for joining us. We are truly so grateful that you were able to be with us tonight. Thank you to our wonderful co-chairs this evening, Leslie and Dana. You have taken this position and just run with it, and it has been so exciting to see. And your committee has been amazing. You have worked tirelessly planning this virtual event. My name is Amy Bender-Levy, and I have the great pleasure of chairing Women's Philanthropy. As we have heard tonight, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was inspired by Jewish values that I know so many of us share. These same ideals also help guide the life-changing work of the Federation here in Israel and around the world. We are proud that Federation serves an important role in our St. Louis Jewish community as funder, communicator, and convener. Tonight, you are seeing firsthand how Federation is a convener by bringing Jewish women from across our community. Before we conclude this evening, I want to take a moment to celebrate the incredible women's organizations making a difference in our community. Like so much over the past year, Community Unity had to be a little bit different this year, but we did not want to miss the opportunity to acknowledge these amazing organizations. If you have not already had the chance to do so, please stop by Federation to pick up your resource guide, which includes details about each one of these groups and ways you can become more involved. We will also be sharing an electronic version following tonight's event. As you will see, the depth of the volunteer reach and impact on our community are vast. This brings our program to a close. I want to thank each one of you for celebrating our community unity, and I hope that you stay well and enjoy your evening.
I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I will open my eyes. I will open my eyes. I will not look away. I will not look away. I will use this gift I've been given every day. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. I will give up myself. I will give up myself. I will reach out my hand. I will reach out my hand. I will use this heart I've been given to take a stand. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu